All right, welcome back to a special edition of Bloomberg Businessweek here on Bloomberg TV and radio. I am Romaine Bostic here along with Carol Master. Carol, we've had a lot to talk about today.
Yes.
Despite the fact that it's the day after Christmas, it's still a relatively busy day. And we're going to keep the conversation going because during this holiday season, nonprofits come into focus.
Yeah.
Nonprofits also looking to focus on giving to those in need instead of just receiving. And joining us now to talk about the business side of nonprofit organizations is Partnership with Children CEO Margaret Crotty. How are you?
Fine, thank you.
Well, thanks for joining us. We talk about nonprofits in a way these days much differently than we did a decade ago, a couple of decades ago. It seemed like before the playbook was you go out, you find a couple of well-heeled investors or donators, I should say, and then you just sort of, ride your way to whatever goal you're trying to do. That model doesn't really work anymore, does it?
Oh, no. I mean, we are basically a government contractor, so we take big government contracts and they don't pay the cost of the services that we provide. So if we want to have really good professional development, if we want to have really good technology, if we want to have good evaluation, we have to raise private money to do that. So you're basically juggling scale. So if every government contract produces a deficit, you need to raise that private money. And really the only way you can get to scale is to have government contracts. So it's a balancing act.
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. Can I take a step back? Tell us a little bit about the work you guys do, because you've been doing this for over a century.
That's right. So Partnership with Children was founded in 1908 to serve the children in the city who need it the most. For the last 40 years or so, we've been placing, our DNA is social work. So we have been placing full-time social workers in schools to provide all of the mental health services, all of the social emotional learning services, all of the community school services that children and families need when they're growing up in poverty. We say
that so simply, but there's so many, I don't mean you said it simply, but I think we don't realize the stresses, right, and the difficulties for a young child who grows up in that situation.
You're exactly right. So I personally think that as we learn more and more about neuroscience, we're going to change the way we talk and think about poverty. So toxic stress is the chronic, unrelenting stress that you can often experience if you're growing up in neighborhoods with scarcity, with violence, with instability, homelessness. And if it's unmitigated, it becomes toxic. And I believe that that is the greatest public health issue that we as a society face, because it has short-term problems, medium-term problems, and long-term problems. It helps to mitigate that stress, helps you succeed in school. It prevents short-term and long-term mental health problems. And most importantly, toxic stress produces long-term, very scary long-term physical health issues as well.
Health issues, that's what I was thinking.
And we're starting to recognize that a little bit more and sort of apply a different approach. I'm wondering, though, I mean, I came from a generation where it seemed like some of those stresses were addressed in a way within the schools or within that school system in a little bit more humane way. It seems that we've reverted to, at least in certain school systems, to using more law enforcement and other measures that maybe aren't as I guess, palatable to sort of making sure that these kids are getting help and not just being penalized or punished.
Yeah, so we're really advocating for a trauma-informed approach in schools rather than a punitive approach. So we use a lot of restorative practices. We make sure that when we go into school, we don't say, what's wrong with you? We say, what's happening? What's going on? And that changes everything that follows.
Just a few words, but it makes a big difference.
Exactly.
Well, it's interesting, too. So, and I do think about, the work that you guys are doing. You talk about these government contracts, but I feel like, we talk about the market being at records and the upper echelons of the wealthy, and we know a lot of these folks give back. What's the environment for you guys in terms of meeting the financial needs that you do require to keep this organization going?
Well, we depend on a board. We have a very impressive board that represents, a huge array of big companies, Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, Bank of America, GE, a lot of media companies, IBM, and they really help us with the corporate fundraising as well. But it's hard, and you really have to go out there and show that you have results, and you really want to talk about your impact and the way that your money is being used efficiently and effectively. We try to show scale without showing any kind of complacency. So it's hard, and you really have to work at it.
Yeah.
But to be effective, do you need that scale? Do you have to have that scale as a nonprofit these days?
So I think that is one of the most interesting questions. And so if you're very good at private fundraising, then scale is easy because, your government contracts produce a deficit almost as a rule. But if you can't raise that private money to keep up, then it's hard to have scale. And scale, you don't have efficiencies, economies of scale. I mean, we're talking about the effect of a one-on-one relationship, a social worker with a child. You can't scale that. You can't use artificial intelligence. You have to figure out.
Can't cut corners with that.
You cannot cut corners. And we operate so leanly. There's no unused capacity in our organization. And so scale is a tricky question, but the more children that we can affect with our proven model, our evidence-based practices, the better.
The work that you're doing, just one last question in terms of dealing with toxic stress on kids, and I do feel like stress has become the big topic for everyone, but in this particular population, what kind of payoff have you seen? What kind of impact because of the work that you guys have done?
Yeah, it's almost immediate. I mean, the relationship and the feel with an adult, the feeling of safety, of love, that's the mitigating factor. And so you see attendance go up, you see test scores go up, you see graduation rates go up, you see safety, all the safety measures, all the community measures in schools improve. You see parent engagement improve.
Great.
You see dropout go down. It's immediately.
Well, be sure to stay in touch because we'd love to hear a little bit more about this in the future. Margaret Crotty, thank you so much.
Thank you.
She's the CEO of Partnership with Children, joining us here in our studio.